Hello and welcome to the Alpha Demo and Q&A webcast. I'm Dave McCormick, VP of Products here at Alpha Software. And if you've been following us for the last couple of weeks, we've been going over building web and mobile applications. We started several weeks ago by taking a look at the different component types that were used to build an application. And then we started focusing on the UX. Last week, we went into some of the various controls that were available and how you read those controls, access them in JavaScript, and we took a deep dive into the Jitsi meet control. Today, we're going to be talking about how do you organize those controls together and to create a nice user interface. And to do that, you use Alpha Anywhere's panel system. So that includes panel cards, panel navigators, and panel layouts. So we'll show you how those all get put together, how you put items into those panels, how you navigate from panel to panel, and some other tips and tricks, including dynamic panels and accessing panels in JavaScript. So we think that this should be the definitive one on paneling. When I was putting this together, I realized, gosh, we actually have a good one of these already put together. So I am going to be showing you some video today that I have pulled from last year, but I've edited it down for content and for clarity. And I'm here in the background, ready to answer any questions that you may have. So again, you can type those into the questions box of the GoToWebinar control panel. Okay, so let's get started. Give me one moment here, and we will begin.
Panels in Alpha Anywhere are how you build responsive layouts for your web and mobile applications. They're control found in the UX component, and there's three types. But what they let you to do is create like these views. So panels can be thought of as screens. So here we have a big screen here. All of our controls are laid out side by side, and then we have a few smaller screens over here to handle those smaller screen sizes. And then some tabbing across the top that represents different views in your application. Everything that you see here conceivably could be built with just one UX control with panels, panel cards, panel navigators, panel layouts to present all these different views of the same thing. And they're quite powerful, and they are the key to designing your mobile applications or apps that need to respond to smaller screen sizes. Specifically, panels in Alpha Anywhere are just another type of container. Container is a control that can contain other controls. So a container, you can put text boxes in it, you can put buttons, other containers, so on and so forth. And they're used to create screens in an app. And an app can be a web app or a mobile app within the UX component. Panels can have headers and footers, which is where you might see that on that previous screen. You might see up here might be your header where you've got buttons to navigate to different screens in your application. That could be a footer down here. If you use the Facebook app, the controls are in the footer where you can navigate to while you're using Facebook on your phone. Oops. So it has headers and footers. And then we have three types of panels in Alpha Anywhere. We have the panel card, which is the thing that's going to contain your controls. And then we have two other types. One is a panel layout and a panel navigator. And we're going to go over what each one of those are and when you would use them right now. So a panel card is the simplest panel that exists in Alpha Anywhere. If you design an app with panels, at a minimum, it must have a panel card, and the app could just be a panel card full of all the controls you want to display. So the image here that we've got on the left-hand side here is a panel card. It has a header, it has a footer, and it has a bunch of controls and two buttons in it. And that's it. That's the whole thing. You can put as many other controls in a panel card, including other types of containers. However, you cannot put a panel card in a panel card. Multiple panel cards can only be placed within a panel layout or a panel navigator. And the reason for that is that a panel card is a screen. It represents everything that's being shown. It can be part of the screen, it could be the whole screen, but you can't nest additional screens within panel cards themselves. They're basically the leaf of all the tree of layout, if you think about it like that. But you can place them in panel layouts and panel navigators. And the panel layout and the panel navigator they do two very different things. A panel layout can be used to display one or more panels, or two or more panels, in either like a left to right, right to left layout, horizontal layout, or in a vertical layout. And panel layouts can contain other panels, including panel cards, panel layouts, and panel navigators. So they support nesting. And the space occupied by the things within the panel layout are actually determined by the objects themselves. So every panel layout, panel card, panel navigator placed within a panel layout has a size property that's exposed, and that size property can be used to say how much of the width or the height, depending on the type of layout you have, that panel layout occupies. So our example here on the side, this is a panel layout. It's a left to right layout. It has two panels in it. It has a panel card 1 and a panel layout 2. And that panel layout 2 is a top to bottom layout. It has a panel card 2 and a panel card 3 are placed within that. And you can see how this is spaced out. So panel card is designed to take up a little less space than the panel layout over here. And then panel card 2 takes up a little bit less space than panel card 3. But all in all, no matter where this layout is placed, that's relatively the percentage of the screen that'll be taken up. It'll scale to expand or contract as needed. The other thing that we have is the panel navigator, and this lets you actually just navigate between screens. So the most basic one that we've got an example here on the screen, this would be a carousel type where you swipe right to left or left to right to navigate between each of the panel cards, and each panel card within that navigator contains everything that's going to be displayed. Panel navigators like panel layouts can contain panel cards, panel layouts, and other panel navigators. And they offer several different navigation options. So we have the carousel swipe to go between each one. We have a tab interface. If you have seen our tabbed replacement, I forget the exact title, but Dion did a presentation, I believe it was sometime last year, about how you can use the UX control to create a tabbed UI interface like the tabbed UI component, but that's done using panel cards, panel navigators. And with the tab options, there's a few different ways you can display it. I think there's an option to do buttons and an option to do like literally like have it styled like tabs. And then the third option that you may see used often is programmatic, which is where the navigation is triggered by some event. So you have an app where you've got a list in it that's displaying a bunch of records, maybe a bunch of orders, and you would like to be able to tap on that order and then navigate to a screen that displays all the information in that order. Well, you could do that by placing your creating a panel navigator that has one panel card that displays your list of orders and a second panel card that contains the actual information you want to see. And then that navigation, when you tap on that record, would be that transition from your first panel card to the second one that contains all the data you want to show. And then often in that situation, you may include like a back button and a header on that second panel card so you can get back. So done in a panel navigator, but it's done programmatically. And there's two JavaScript functions you can use. We also have action JavaScript you can do this with, which we'll take a look at later. But there's a panel set active, which sets the active panel card no matter where it is in your entire layout. And then there's a panel navigate, which is specific to the panel navigator, and it has options to like go next or go previous or go back and forward through history. And then this is just a picture of really driving home like what you can do with panel nesting, so that we saw that panel layout on a few slides before, but this one has been modified where that third panel card is actually inside of a panel navigator. And then you can navigate between that panel card 3 or another panel navigator that has more panel cards in it. So you can really nest this as deep as you want to and do a lot of interesting things with it. If we go back up to this, you could conceivably have this be a panel layout, right? That's top to bottom with one that's horizontal here with your 3 controls in it, another one that's horizontal here. It's got one here, and then it's got a different layout here where it's got like a top to bottom that has one on the top, and then a left to right down here that contains your data like that. With respect to responsive design and screen sizes, there are cases where you may not be able to display everything that you need to use. So the panel layouts actually have an additional feature in them that let you dock something, let you hide a panel if it's determined that the space that's available isn't enough to display all your content, which you can control through, again, the size property for that panel. There's a minimum size where you can say, like, if the space available, it doesn't meet, this criteria, then automatically dock, hide this panel card off screen somewhere. And then you can bring that back on screen either through tapping a button or through some other interaction to bring that content into view. A bunch of different ways with how you can present it. You can slide over your content, you can push content out of the way, but that is there for just smaller screen sizes. And that's going to apply on, like, you have small devices that you just can't display everything you want to display, or maybe you've got a mobile app where in horizontal mode, landscape mode, holding sideways in my mind, you've got enough room to do two things side by side. But if it's then flipped up to portrait, maybe you can't do both those things side by side. So maybe you have a layout here where panel card 1 contains all your navigation, and panel card 2 displays things, like opens components or something like that. In the case where that orientation changes from landscape, where you had enough space, to portrait, you could hide that panel card 1 and then reopen it with a button or a menu option. So that is actually kind of a really cool thing. And if we have time, I would like to show it to you. I'd like to point out that this does exist. There are also a few other things out there you can do with panels. We have a panel. I forget what it's called. It's a panel something. It basically is like it's a panel overlay. It can be overlaid on top of your content through a different mechanism. So you could tap something and then overlay a message or a form you want to get some information out of, or maybe it's an image showing a larger image. It's one of those concepts out there that you can take advantage of. Not necessarily a panel per se, but it's in that same idea of screens, designing screens and presenting them in a way that makes sense. So I'm going to create a new UX component, and before I do that, I'm going to make a new project. I'm going to call it panels in this workspace. Yeah, let's make it a GitHub repo so I can put that up on GitHub after this is over, and we'll make a new panel. Well, no, not a new panel. We'll make a new UX component. So to create a new component, if you've got all files or web components selected, you can make a new component. Component is those building blocks for your web and mobile applications. I clicked this button. This is a little drop-down menu. You can it remembers what you picked last. So if you are always making UX components, you can actually just create like a little hotbar here, a button where you just click it and you don't need to go through that new dialog. But you can also get to components through new, web component, UX component. Next. And with getting started with components, it can be difficult to understand sort of like what we're talking about. What do you mean by navigation, layout, and stuff? So before you even start working with those controls, we actually have a bunch of templates in here that show panel cards. So we have a panel card with a header and title and buttons. We have a panel card with a footer. We have one that's demonstrating a panel navigator with 3 panel cards. And then there's a bunch of other things in here too that also use panels, like our mobile app framework 2-panel responsive layout. Come in here and explore, see what we did. I think a lot of you will find it valuable. Just kind of start with a template and sort of explore, like, what is it doing? How is it all put together? So we'll start with this. Start with the responsive layout one here. And whenever you add a new UX component from a template, there's usually a help menu that pops up that explains some information in there. It didn't pop up here. I think I may have turned it off. I'll just go quickly. Grab that one again. Panel responsive layout. It basically displays this text here. So what this panel, this example is, this template, is if the screen is wide enough, if you've got enough real estate to work with, both of the panels will be shown. Otherwise, the left panel is going to be hidden. And the user, you or whoever's using your app, has to do something to bring that panel into view. This is the example of docked panels. It's got a panel. It's a panel layout. It's got 2 panel cards in it, and then each one of these has a panel header. So if we take a look at this in, let's do a live preview here. Let's do a working preview. So my server won't start. Yes, CSS icons. We'll fix that briefly. So here is the panel, and I apologize that the Galaxy 5S horizontal thing, it hasn't quite rendered yet. Sometimes when I'm on the webinar, it feels like I've just got too much stuff running, so my computer slows down a little bit. So you may see that a bit today during the demo. But this is the left-hand panel that disappears. This is the right-hand panel. If we change this to a vertical layout, you notice that the right-hand panel is gone and now a button has appeared. And when we tap that, it pulls that right-hand panel into view. This letter A is an artifact of I haven't installed the CSS fonts required by the style sheet required by this this template, which is the iOS template, which uses CSS icons. We can talk about that briefly, but just to show you again, you tap this, there's that other panel in the layout. We go back to our horizontal display. Now there's enough space to show both, and that button is gone. And if we look in design, this button here I believe it has a rule on it. No, let's start with the panel layout. So with the docked panel, the thing that's required for that is that your panels need to have a layout size. So panel card 1 requires at least 300 pixels, or requires 300 pixels of space to be displayed. Panel card 2 also requires 300 pixels, but a minimum. So if the screen is bigger, panel card 2 will grow to fill that space, while panel card 1 will remain that 300 pixel width. So if there's not enough space, what will happen is that this panel will get docked. And the dock setting is shown, I believe, only when you specify a size. So maybe it's always there. So we see dock here, there's no setting here. Here's dock. This is gonna use the default behavior. So it was off screen and then scroll back into screen. But if you wanna, kind of control about which side that panel gets docked on, maybe you want it to be docked before the panel above it, after the panel above it in this layout. That's where you can control this. You can even get as specific as it's in portrait, it's collapse, or in landscape. Play with those a bit. They can be a little bit confusing to think about if you want to learn panels, but I recommend just going through and clicking on those settings and just playing with it in the preview mode to get yourself familiar with it. But this panel will be docked if it doesn't meet the minimum size. And then it also has a navigation button called the back button. It has a previous card button. So that will only get shown if the navigation needs to happen. So if it's been docked, that button will be shown. That button is actually here in this panel header. So that's how you hook up the back button activity in this template. And then if you look at the panel layout, there's something called docked panel controller buttons. And this is where you can define the docked panels. And I'm interesting to see that that's not listed in there. So it must happen on a event. But one way you can specify your docked panel controller buttons, you can come in here to say this button ID. When you click this button, it's going to display this panel. There are other ways to do it, as we're learning here. This one, I'm going to guess, is possibly defined in the responsive layout settings. Responsive layout settings is where you can come in here and customize actions. So this one says if the screen width, it's got 2 in here, it changes the layout. If the screen width is greater than 600, we're going to use our regular JavaScript setting here, which is going to display that button 1, or it's going to hide that button. So if there's not enough space to display everything, it's going to hide button 1 using this set control display JavaScript. Otherwise, if there isn't enough space, then this dynamically displays that button, so you're able to tap on it to get back to where you were. You can do a ton of stuff here with the responsive layout genie. This is a ton of fun to use to build responsive layouts. You can do all sorts of things in here. You don't just have to run JavaScript. There's a bunch of actions in here. You can modify properties on a panel layout. And I believe it's any property on the panel layout. So if we pick our panel layout there, we could change the flow direction. So maybe we've got a left to right layout on a landscape orientation, but then if the user rotates it, maybe we want to flip that to top to bottom. So then our panels would line up so you can scroll up and down the screen as opposed to right to left. Maybe that makes more sense. So you can show and hide headers and footers, update CSS in here. I'll delete that action. Actions are defined on everything here, so this is something you're gonna think about when you're working with your panels. But that's how this one works. Again, actually, let's briefly talk about what that CSS warning was. We come over to properties. This template is based on the iOS 7 web theme, which is one of our older web themes. Well, it's not. Well, it is. It's older. It was added when we introduced the ability to use CSS icons in Alpha Anywhere. We made it pretty easy to use that. They're included with your install. You just need to add them, turn them on, install them so you can test them locally. But the iOS 7 one uses font icons. It's one of our Sass themes. Newer Sass themes like the Alpha theme and everything that's based on it use SVG icons for the layout. So if we switch this to the Alpha theme here and then do a working preview, we're not going to get that CSS message anymore. And the icons used in here will be different. So here they're left and right. We change that to a vertical layout. That's our button. There's no icon now. There's our back button. That was an A before. Now it's an arrow. Hit back. And then do horizontal. I see there's a little bit of tweaking that needs to happen here in our header so that it's just a little bit taller. But other than that, that's all you really need to do. To change this, if you like the iOS 7 theme, which iOS 7 was a while ago, you need to install the CSS fonts, and that's setting down here. It's the CSS font icons thing, and you just need to come here and check the ones to use. The warning message on the working preview tells you what you need to do to install them. Basically, you need to install those fonts, the font icons on your system for it to show up while you're developing. And once you do it once, you never have to do it again. So that's this layout. There's a few others in here. We can go look at another one. Let's look at menu. Is it menu? Here's another one. Uses a fly-in menu, so you can set the active panel. We'll click OK. Take a look at that. So here's another example component. This one uses a panel navigator to show the different the panels. And this one's the navigator type is programmatic. So if we do a working preview on this one. Here we go. This is the home screen. This button here flies in something for us to navigate with. So we could, click here, click show list. That displays the list that's on another panel. Go back to the home. This shows a pop-up window. So screens. So that panel card 2 has our list. It's a list screen. Panel card 1 is our home screen. That menu is being displayed by using an injectable container, which can be used, or injectable containers let you place a bunch of controls anywhere you need them by placing them in an injectable container, and then at some point when you need to display that content, there's a function gets called. You can call a function action JavaScript, or in the cases of the control bar here, this disclosure button, which is the thing that's displaying that content, I believe. Display type outside before. Yes, so this is the thing that's displaying it. It has this bars icon. This disclosure, which is defined on the disclosures tab, which we should do another webinar in the future on this. It's getting the content to show in the disclosure that slide in panel from the content that's actually an injectable one container, which is a nice way to add a dynamic content into your app. Injectable containers, when you do it, you could do it with the doc panel here. Again, doc panels are a panel layout. So what you would actually have to do is wrap this whole thing inside of a panel layout and then move your menu inside of a panel card that's displayed before your panel navigator, and then dock it off to the side and then activate it on a button click, which could be configured here through the control bar.
How about panels for web apps?
Yes, they work in both. So, you know, these are showing a mobile preview, but if you turn that off and you ignore the CSS installation message for the 5th time, this is what it looks like. And should your app get too small, which is hard to demonstrate here because these actually the preview window takes a minimum. Yeah, let's start that. Let's not start that. Cool. Maybe we could just do a remote test real quick. Or not a remote test. We can, let's save a page here. Panel 1. Let's save our component. Split view panels. Save a page. We'll resave it over that one. Yes, let's replace it. And then come over here and do a live test. And I'm gonna throw it up on Alpha Cloud. This is a nightly build. It may ask me to log in. There we go. And this is asking me for a default page. I only have one. I want to see panels.a5w. The default page is the page that's shown by default when someone navigates to your site, but didn't specify a specific a5w page as part of the URL. Let's put this up here on cloud. And there it goes. So we click on our live test here. I just drag it over here somehow. There's our app, and as this gets narrower, see how that switched over. So that responsive design, those responsive design rules are what control this. This became less than 600 pixels, so it shrunk everything. But now here, these two can be displayed side by side. So, and as we move this, see how the right-hand panel grows to fill the content. Getting back to getting started. Templates, good thing to go explore, see what's there. Maybe there's something that already does what you need to, and you just need to plug in your content. It can really accelerate your development, and it helps you learn. How did we do something? In terms of starting from scratch, if you start with a new blank component, which is selected up here by default, you can find panels here in the panel section of we're on the controls pane. This is like the toolbox area down here. But in here, you're going to have all your panels. So you have panel layout, panel navigator, which you can add panel cards to. And then we also have something called quick panels, which I would like to show you real quick. Quick panels is sort of like a quick way of building out a layout. So you've mocked up your app, you've got a wireframe, and you've figured out where your screens are, and you know exactly what screens you want to add, and you know that you need 2 side by side, so you're going to insert those in a panel layout. And when you can double click these to add them, it's going to ask you if you want a header or footer. We're just going to ignore that. So you have a panel layout, and then if you insert a tab, this is tabs are the thing used in this UI to define when something is nested inside something. So if I have a panel layout at the top and I want to put 2 panel cards in it, without a header or footer, we'll do a panel card 1, tab again, double click it again. So this is a panel layout. It contains 2 panel cards. And when I click OK, Alpha Anywhere, it will generate the layout for me. And there it is. So that's very quick. You do not have to start from a blank UX to use that tool. It will insert those panels wherever your whatever the current control is selected. In the layout, we'll add those. I'm going to close all those out real quick. If we go back in there, we do have a few predefined views. We have one that's like a predefined split view. And if you click on this link down here, it gives you a few more options, but this shows you what you're going to get. So this is a panel navigator. It's got 3 panel cards, and it adds a static text object, and that's really just for you. In fact, let's just go with that one. If you go in and you preview a layout after you've created it and there's nothing in it, you're just going to have white screens, and it's kind of hard to tell, what you've done. So there's our static text, and that layout that inserted the panel navigator with those 3 panels uses the default carousel method. So if I click and I drag here, there's our different screens. You can remove these. You don't have to keep them. It's just really for your reference when you're working with it. In fact, let's just remove those real quick just to give you that experience. If there's nothing in there and you preview these things, then it may give the appearance that your app is broken, right? Because it's loaded and it's running now, but there's nothing there. But if you click and slide, then you can kind of see that we're going through a couple panel cards. But at this point, we're kind of lost. We don't really know which one we're on. So that's what that text is there for you. Since we're here on panel navigator, I wanted to talk about the navigator type, which is a property of the panel navigator. They all default to carousel, but there's a bunch in here that you can choose from. There's tab band, tab buttons. Let's take a look at that real quick. This is tab buttons. You know what? I'm gonna go turn off. I'm gonna go change our theme here. The reason why it's doing that is because Alpha Anywhere remembers the previous theme you used, your previous style, when you make components. So it tries to keep using it as a helping something helpful for you, so that you're using the same. Oops. So I have tab buttons. Let's see here. Let's click on more. This kind of describes what you can do. Tab buttons, you have a button for each panel in the panel navigator in the header and the footer. So we need to add buttons for this. Let's say it has a previous card and a next card. And let's add a header here. You can do that through a few ways. You can insert panel headers are actually container. They're a special type of container. So we're going to come here and type in container. And here we are. We have panel header and panel footer. Insert after. Any panel type, a panel navigator, a panel layout, or a panel card can have a header or a footer. I picked footer. But if we add a few buttons in here, let's look at button previous, and remove the new line after it so it stays on the same line. And I want to add a button, and then I want to name it next. Let's call this one next. We come here to the panel navigator is configured to use tab buttons. We can assign those buttons here. So button 1 is going to navigate to the previous one. Button 2 is going to navigate to the next one. So down here in the footer, we have next, and you can't tell because we took that text off. And I don't think you can tell either through the compression on the video, but there is a line that's whizzing across the screen here as we navigate. But that's your navigation. This is button navigation. Pretty easy to set up. The other option, which we have a whole series on, is the tab band, and this is going to give you your tabbed UI look. panel card 1, panel card 2, panel card 3. Notice down here we still have those navigation buttons. You can still use those. You can have both if you want. We've had people ask about this lookout. It doesn't look like a tabbed interface, right? Because it doesn't have your classic folder tabs that you might see on a filing cabinet. You can change that through I believe subthemes here on this guy, tab and subtheme. And if you don't know subthemes, they're fantastic for adding custom UI. So the base one, the one that's used by default in the alpha theme, is this top one. But there's another one called Flared, which is going to give you that tabbed look. So we click OK here, and we will now see those tabs instead of those just colored text on a gray background. So that's building out panels. If we wanted to do something like wrap this whole thing in a panel layout, you can just insert that straight from here with the panels, select everything, add your panel layout. It will wrap those controls. If you don't want to use the left to right flow direction, the horizontal, you can maybe want to do right to left, you can flip it. These are the two options here: TTB, top to bottom, BTT, bottom to top. Let's just do that real quick. Here's our panel navigator. Whoop, cancel. I'm going to add a panel card here after. And let's put text box there, text control, static text. And we'll say it is, why not, panel card 4. Just so there's something in there that we can see. So this is bottom to top layout. So panel card 4 will be on the bottom, and the panel navigator will be above it. Might not make sense to you why, but just to show you how these work. There's a panel card 4. There's a panel navigator. They take up an equal amount of space in the panel layout because we have not defined any size. So if these are blank, panels will take up an equal amount of space, or if one of them has a size, the other one will take up all available space that's left. If we change our bottom to top, top to bottom, then the panels will be rendered in the order that you see them here. A panel card 4, there's our tabs, and so on and so forth. Again, we could do left to right is the default one when you add it, but this is that two panel split layout kind of start. Maybe over here you've got a menu. Maybe instead of putting all your navigation buttons down here in the footer, maybe you just have them over here on the side to go through your panel navigator. Or maybe panel card 4, you add buttons to display those individual panel cards. So we looked at tab buttons, which you have to specify buttons that do the activation. Tab band, which makes it look like a tabbed interface, like the tabbed UI. And then programmatic, you do programmatically. So somebody clicks a button or selects an option in a list, a record, or agrees to some pop-up window. Programmatic navigation, if you have an app that uses integrated login, programmatic navigation would be used there, where after the user logs in, if the login is valid, if the credentials are approved, programmatically navigate to your main application, which could be another panel with your component embedded in it. In fact, that's exactly how we did it in the, we'll go look at that in the login component. So if we go new, web component, login component, and we pick image on left, call this one login. Sure, back it up. And then we go look at login. Here is a panel layout, but wrapped around that is a panel navigator. And so if we come down here, there's the end of our panel layout, which is the first panel in the panel navigator. And then the second panel in the panel navigator is actually the application, and it is programmatically shown once that login is valid. And your application you can control include all the controls here. You can embed another UX component if you would prefer that it was, broken out somewhere to make it a little bit easier to work with, because this is a lot of stuff to try to visually parse through when you're developing your application. But this panel navigator is programmatically navigated, so that navigation doesn't happen until the user login is complete. So we come back here. If you wanted to do it here, it would programmatically show panel card 1, panel card 2, or panel card 3. And what I'm going to do real quick is use Control D to duplicate these so I can put them in these panel cards, these static text items, so that we can actually tell which panel we're on. So edit those real quick. Panel card 1, duplicate that again. Yes, I love Control D, the hotkey. It makes it really easy to duplicate a bunch of things really quickly. And when you're doing something like this, or even just let's move that one down and rename it panel card 3. Just build in an app where you actually need to duplicate a few things, a few controls that you're building an interface that has similar design on each page, but the controls will do different things. Just having that hotkey is really useful. Panel card 1, 2, and 3. Panel card 4, which will be our navigation one, and let's just add a few buttons here. Let's add a button. We'll say panel 1, and then we'll add another one. I'm going to show you guys in this tray where those buttons are. It's down in other controls, and if it'll stay scrolled, we can just click that one to quickly add. So we'll do panel 2, and then a third button, panel 3. And then to add the navigation piece, we can edit the buttons click event. So we close that real quick. Buttons have events. JavaScript touch mouse pointer events. Click is the action that will be performed. But this is all these buttons, and even text controls. They have events, event hooks, JavaScript properties you can set to trigger something, trigger a workflow or do something when a specific type of interaction happens. The one that we use the most, that everybody uses the most, clicking. Clicking is the same as tapping in the case of a mobile app here. But there's others. What happens if somebody swipes on that control? Maybe it does something different. But we'll do click, and we will open up this property. If you double click a button control, it shortcuts to this. But here in this property, we can add a new action that happens when it's clicked. We'll use action JavaScript, add new action. And if we search for panel actions, there's a few in here, but we're going to look at panel actions, multiple actions. And one of those actions that you can do is set the active panel, which is the panel being shown right now. And when we click the button that says panel 1, we want to show panel card 1. Click OK and save, and that's it. That's all we have to do to add that navigation in for these buttons. So we'll quickly add it to the other two. I'm going to double click on these to open up that same event. Add a new action, search for panel. We're going to say set active panel. This one's going to open panel card 2. Save it. And then again, for panel 3, add a new action. Search for panel. Set active panel, and then panel card 3. Click OK, OK, and save that. And so now we'll live preview. We'll still see those next and previous buttons in the footer here because we haven't removed them. But when we click on these controls, it's not obvious that panel card 1 was set active, but it was panel card 2, panel card 3, panel card 1. So that's how you can add programmatically that navigation using buttons. So this is our menu, and this is our information here. Last thing I really wanted to touch on quickly is something called fill panel card, and we'll just use panel card 1 as the example. There are a bunch of controls, or maybe a few controls, that have a property on them called fill panel card. And I'm going to pick a view box here just so that we don't have to use any data to back it. And insert that here. So ViewBox has a property called fill container. When this is checked, the ViewBox control will expand to fill the entire container that it's in. And in the case of the panel card, it will expand to fill the entire panel card, no matter what size it is. If you have a control in a panel card that has fill container checked, it's the only control that's allowed to be in that panel card. Now, you can still have headers and footers on that panel. So I could still come in here and say, add a header here, and let's use a control bar for this one. The control bar is just a control that contains all your navigation stuff in one place so you can edit it. And let's just add a static text item here. Call it header. And item name, group name, the HTML text, let's call it panel 1. All right, and then make a layout for this because the control bar doesn't display anything if it doesn't have a layout. We'll just add the default layout. We'll add a line to that layout, and in the middle, we'll add our header. Okay, done. So that's going to display the text panel 1. Click OK. So now this has a control bar on it that displays text, but that view box is going to fill all the available space that's left in the panel part, and just so that there's something in here. Let's load a sample view box. Let's do the map one. I like the map one. And just click OK and do a working preview again. So this is our view box here. See how it fills? It's filled the whole panel. If we make this taller, it will continue to fill the whole panel. Map maybe not be a great example since it doesn't expand downward. But if you see, if we make it wider, see how it grows downward, becomes taller. ViewBox is the control that does that. The list control does that to fill the whole panel with all of its contents. There are a few others that do that. I believe, yes, the control bar has a fill container option. So the container that it's in this case, it's in a panel header container. If you check that, it fills it. It does that automatically already. Well, no, it doesn't. It has a width of 100%. But if this panel header had like a height value on it, this fill container option would expand it vertically to fill that height. Form view control is another one. I also I believe that we have something called freeform layout. I think freeform layout might have it as well, but I may be wrong on this. No, it does not. So we'll take that one out. And it added 2 because I double clicked that control. So yeah, if it fills a container, you can't have anything else in there. If you do want other things on that panel, it has to be inside of a header or a footer. So that's the fill container. And then finally, I gave you guys the link to that understanding panels, but I also wanted to point out in the documentation where you can go to learn more about the panel methods. And so search for, actually, let's go up to, what is panels here? Don't think it's linked in here. I have a mental note to update this for you guys. Let's go look for set panel active. There's 2. There's one on the dialog object, and there's one on the panel navigator and one on the panel layout. You want the dialog object panel set active method. This is actually the JavaScript that gets called by that action JavaScript we added to set the panel. If we go look at that here, back in here, we open up, like, let's look at button 1. If we view the JavaScript here, all it's calling is that dialog object panel set active method. If you wanted to have a bunch of logic around that before you called it, you could do something like just convert this to text mode and add it. If you prefer to work with JavaScript, you can insert these methods using the insert UX component method link down here at the bottom, and you would search for panel, and you're going to get a lot of stuff. In addition to panel set active, there's a method to find out what panel is active. You know, what's the panel's width? What's its height? If you're using dynamic panels are panels added programmatically. If you add a panel to a panel navigator, you can remove that panel with panel remove on that panel navigator. It requires the panel name. If we look at the, let's just cancel out of this and not save it real quick. Open it back up, go back in here. In addition to the set active panel, you know, there's a whole bunch of other things you can do. You can, you know, find out which active, you know, docked panel is active in the panel layout. You can add a dynamic panel card to a panel navigator, which opens up a whole lot of possibility for you if you know, to provide a really dynamic experience for your users. So, you know, look into that. And, you know, all of this stuff is backed by a JavaScript library, which you can find here. This is quite long. I have asked the dev team to help me out fixing that that issue that you just saw there. If we search on this pane here, we go down, down, down. There's, you know, get panel object, you know, panel get active, the height, navigate, what's the width. There's another section called panel object methods. These are methods that you call on a panel, which you get using the panel get method. And, you know, you can add a panel, you can get that panel state, you can hide a dock, you can set that panel state. And then, you know, beyond that, if we back out of here into the A5 namespace, there's a whole bunch of stuff here for panel cards, panel layouts, and panel navigators. So you can do a lot with it.
Excellent. Well, I hope you found that helpful there on panels. We did get a couple of questions in, although not a lot to do with panels. Our questions today had to do with a regular expression, which unfortunately I didn't know the answer to off the top of my head. In fact, they tend to confuse me. But this, but I have to look it up each time. But just as a reminder, if you do have questions, you can always send them to guides, GUIDES @alphasoftware.com. And that looks like it for questions here today. I just want to thank everyone for showing up. Next week, Dion McCormick will be returning, and he will be carrying on demonstrating the task manager application that he's been building. So I think you'll find that quite interesting. Until then, take care, stay well. See you next Wednesday. Bye-bye.